Have you seen what's happening in your sanctuary lately? Join us right now for another episode of Your Sanctuary, a program that highlights what makes our National Marine Sanctuary so special and the people that keep them that way.
Welcome to another episode of Your Sanctuary. Today we will be exploring deep sea habitats, how we study them, and some of the people involved. One of the most amazing features in the sanctuary is the massive underwater Monterey Canyon, beginning just offshore in Moss Landing and extending outward for more than 50 miles. It's unusual to have a deep canyon ecosystem just like this right so close to shore, and many local research institutions and universities have taken advantage to develop long-term comprehensive studies here. While most of the ocean is still unexplored, Monterey Bay is one of the best studied areas of ocean in the world. And joining me today to talk about deep sea research is Chris Scholin, President and CEO of the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institution, or better known as MBARI. Welcome to Your Sanctuary, Chris.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Great to have you here. You know, the Monterey Bay is so well studied. Why so much focused research here, especially deep sea research?
Well, I think it begins with the sense of place. There is such a rich set of environments, from marsh and intertidal, the deep sea, as you mentioned, the canyon, and of course embedded within all of that is a commercial fishery, and with a very storied past and present and future. And I think that richness is what brings so many people here to study it.
Why the focus on the deep sea?
Well, I think the deep sea is one of those enigmatic places. It's often said we know more about the surface of Mars than we know about the surface of the deep ocean, which is a large fraction of the planet's surface.
MBARI has amazing technology and an array of tools that you use to go to the deep ocean. One of those is the cabled observatory, where you do all kinds of neat experiments. Tell us about the cabled observatory and what goes on out there.
It's literally a plug in the ocean. It's not a small plug, it's quite a big one, and they're not very cheap. But those plugs allow you to put all kinds of machines down on the ocean floor to study seismic occurrences, earthquake, for example, to study deep sea life, and to do so without necessarily having to be there on a ship. And this just opens up doors that were never open before. Now, outside of the cable, we also have a whole range of autonomous vehicles that ply the waters and enable people to study the oceans also from afar, if you will. So it's a very rich space to work in.
So all these tools and technologies are generating a lot of information. How do you deal with so much information?
Well, that's something that's really enabled by not only people, but through the modern wonders of internet technologies and computing processing and so forth. This material can be recorded in a way that allows scientists to make queries of it, to connect the dots, as it were, between, say, temperature and occurrence of species or oxygen, and it's from that we're able to derive these long-term trends.
So how do we make all this information relevant to people and to management agencies like the sanctuary so we can understand what's happening out in the ocean and make good decisions about how to manage and protect?
I think that from my perspective, it begins with what's the story behind the story. It's helped us a great deal to look to the public to help us write stories for the public, and by engaging people who are not scientists to tell those stories. And of course, imagery is another wonderful way to communicate. Synthetic views or even just pictures of the bizarre creatures, some of which have never been known to science before.
What are some of the biggest discoveries that MBARI has made out in the Monterey Bay?
Just starting with the canyon. We've learned that the canyon is a mysterious place that's subject to some pretty violent movement of sediment as it flows downslope, and it's an amazingly energetic habitat, and I don't think anyone was expecting that to be the case. When I think about some of the animals, a whole range of organisms that were discovered that no one ever knew were present, like worms that eat bones, that help degrade bones from sunken whales. I mean, this is like the stuff of science fiction. And farther afield, of course, places like Davidson Seamount, for example, and the beautiful deep-sea corals. Here we are in the best studied place in the world, and we still find new things every day.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming on to Your Sanctuary, and keep up the good work at MBARI.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to be here.
Monterey Bay contains one of the largest concentrations of marine research institutions in the world.
Now here in the Monterey Bay, we have world-class deep-sea researchers who not only study the deep, but they go there too in submersibles. With me today is one of these deep-sea rock stars, Dr. Bruce Robison. Welcome to Your Sanctuary, Bruce.
Thanks, Paul. It's good to be able to work in our sanctuary.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, you have seen and documented some amazing deep-sea creatures. Tell us about these creatures.
The challenges of living deep in the ocean are pretty straightforward, but they're profound. It's cold, it's dark, and the pressure increases the deeper you go. The animals have to adjust their behavior, their structure, their physiology in order to cope with those challenging environmental parameters. Part of the reason for their uniqueness is that they are at home in circumstances that would be fatal to you and me. And in the process of adapting to living in deep water, these animals have adopted some remarkable adaptations, like telescopic eyes that let them see in very, very dim light, and have binocular vision the way we do. Most fishes have eyes that look out to the sides, but the barrel eye and a number of other deep-sea fishes have eyes that look in parallel lines in more or less the same direction. And that gives them the overlap of their visual field, and as a consequence, they have really good depth perception for finding their prey. The tubular eyes on that remarkable fish also multiply the amount of light that gets into them. Down where they live, there's very little light, and so they have to maximize their ability to use the little bit of light that's available. And so there are all sorts of mirrored surfaces inside and accessory retinas that raise the threshold of vision. It's really wonderful to resolve those puzzles and find out just how those systems work.
Tell us about this vastness and how little of it we've actually been to and explored.
The deep ocean is the largest living space on Earth. Largest any way you want to slice it. Largest in terms of aerial extent, largest in terms of number of individual animals, largest in terms of overall biomass. It's huge. If an alien scout ship were sent to Earth, chances and its mission was to investigate the dominant animal communities on Earth, they wouldn't be up here with us. They'd be down in the deep sea.
But you've spent a lot of time in the deep sea, actually. You're one of the few scientists that just every week you're out to sea and you're exploring things. So you've seen a lot. You've been in submersibles a lot. I've only been on 2 very short, shallow dives just right out of the harbor. Tell us about what it's like to be in these submersibles and how often you get to do that.
Getting into a human-occupied vehicle or a manned submersible is so much fun I can't believe that they pay me to do it. Because it's exciting and challenging, both physically and intellectually. You have to have your wits about you if you want to come back with the data. And at the same time, it is really exciting because you're trying to make sense of what you're seeing, and what you're seeing is so different from what we're accustomed to. You and I and everyone else on Earth lives in a 3-dimensional world, and yet we're tied to an interface. Gravity keeps us stuck to a substrate. We can get in an airplane and fly up, or we can walk up and down stairs, but in the oceanic water column, it's a truly three-dimensional habitat. And as a consequence, things happen in different patterns than we're accustomed to. And so making observations and interpreting the kinds of things that we see has to take place in a three-dimensional context. That's pretty challenging at first, but it helps if you can get into the habitat yourself and fly around in it and understand that up and down is as important, sometimes more important than the other spatial planes. It's a whole different way of thinking, but it's fascinating once you finally get it.
Have you had some scary moments in submersibles?
Sure, a few. I really like these little one-person submersibles where you don't have to ask a pilot to do this or justify what it is you want to do. Being able to fly around sort of instinctively or intuitively is preferable. And while I've had close calls in subs with multiple occupants, the most exciting ones are the ones where there's no one else to ask for help. Several years ago, I was diving in the Santa Barbara Basin in a little submersible, and I was flying along, and everything was fine, and suddenly all the power cut out. Thrusters went out, the lights went out, the life support went out, everything went dead. Fortunately, the sub was trimmed to neutral buoyancy, but I was just sort of there, kind of bouncing up and down. And I thought for a minute that I was going to be frightened, but at the time, and this was a few years ago, so I was listening to a Walkman and not an iPod. But the song I was listening to was Springsteen singing Dancing in the Dark. And the irony of it all made me laugh, so that instead of being frightened, I thought it was a hoot. And so I was able to turn around and find the circuit breaker and flip the switch and get things back powered up and on again. But yeah, things like that happen. A couple of times I've almost gotten sucked into the screws of the ship that was trying to pick me up. But hey, I'm still here.
I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We want you to keep going down. We want you to keep coming back. So thanks so much, Bruce.
Thank you.
The sanctuary hosts 1,276 reported shipwrecks and 718 prehistoric sites.
Reporter Deirdre Whalen is in the field with this week's Hospitality Spotlight. Let's go out to Deirdre now and see what's going on.
Today I'm here with Sylecia Johnston of the Monterey County Business Council. Sylecia, can you tell me a little bit about the Business Council and your role in the organization?
Sure. The Monterey County Business Council is a public-private partnership. So we work really closely with different government departments and as well with men and women in the business world who are interested in protecting the environment, in economic vitality, and in the well-being of our local community. We manage the county's competitive clusters, one of which is specifically dedicated to tourism. And since my background is in sustainable destination management, I'm the program manager for the tourism cluster, specifically focusing on sustainable and ecotourism initiatives for the county.
Monterey County is a beautiful place to visit, and most people come here for the gorgeous ocean and to enjoy it. But what many people don't realize is that this is home to one of only 13 national marine sanctuaries. Now, I'm curious what your ideas are on how businesses can better market the presence of the area and the sanctuary.
Some important things that local tourism and hospitality businesses need to do is really begin to think big picture and kind of expand their view, and then train their frontline employees in the same way, because they're the ones who interact day to day with our visitors. And really begin to get involved in the community and collaborate and communicate with other organizations that they might not normally collaborate with before.
Now, what's this I hear about the Tourism Ambassador Program?
Well, there are ambassador programs across the United States and destinations, and even in the world, throughout the world. So we are developing an ambassador program right here for the region, and we're in the beginning initial development stages of it. So what it does is it trains frontline employees and volunteers on the region's history, assets, branding, really how to tell our area's story, and then also trains them on how to make the customer experience the best experience they have. It really enhances it. And so this leads to longer stays, returned visits, good word-of-mouth advertisement, and therefore a sustained tourism industry.
Well, Sylecia, everyone knows that healthy oceans make for vibrant coastal communities. This seems to fit right in with ecotourism. Can you tell us what you mean by that and how businesses might participate?
The International Ecotourism Society defines ecotourism as responsible travel to natural areas that conserves the environment and improves the well-being of local people. Ecotourism, geotourism, nature-based adventure travel, these are all predicted to grow by the United Nations World Tourism Organization rapidly over the next few years, above and beyond regular mass tourism. What's great is that we have all of these amazing assets and resources right here in our area to market to that niche tourism and draw in this new wave of ecotourists right here, especially with jewels such as the National Marine Sanctuary.
What's the one thing that you'd like to see accomplished this coming year?
I would really like to see the Monterey Bay region be one of the early adopters of the Global Sustainable Tourism Criteria for destinations. This is a designation that is approved by the United Nations and other really major tourism and environmental organizations. It requires a strong commitment through a collaboration of multiple stakeholders to protect the area assets like the sanctuary, because this is why tourists come from across the world to visit us.
26,000 square miles of land drain into the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary.
We started our Sanctuary on the Street segment to find out what you think about sanctuary subjects. Let's go to Steve Elsie right now and see what he's discovered.
Thank you very much, Paul. We are out here on the streets along the sanctuary, finding out what people really think. What produces more oxygen, the ocean or the forest?
Forest.
The forest, I would say.
The ocean.
I would definitely say the ocean.
I believe the ocean.
I'm thinking the ocean.
I would say the forest, but I think it's algae since we're in Monterey Bay.
Algae.
I do believe it's the ocean. The ocean. The ocean.
It sounds like she thinks it's the forest. What produces more oxygen in the ocean? Octopus, a whale, or plankton?
Plankton, I'm gonna guess.
Plants. I believe it's plants.
Plants.
Plankton. Plants.
Now, do you know what process that's called whereby the plants produce oxygen?
I believe that's called photosynthesis.
Do you know what photosynthesis is?
Yes.
Paul, we've moved from the wharf over to historic Custom House Plaza State Park for more of what people are really thinking. How deep do you think the water is right off the coast of Monterey? Is it 100 feet, 1,000 feet, or 5,000 feet?
Probably 100 feet.
I don't know, maybe 100 feet.
There's a trench that extends out from the Monterey Bay, but I don't know how deep it goes.
6,800 feet.
He's a genius. Thank you. Would you just read about that or something?
No, pure guess.